Ever wondered what people ate for dessert in the Middle Ages? Well, let's just say there was no chocolate, no buttercream, and definitely no red velvet. But that doesn't mean it was boring. Medieval cakes and sweets were surprisingly creative, spiced with pepper, sweetened with honey, and sometimes filled with cheese. Today we're diving into the sweet side of medieval life. Not to judge their taste buds, just to explore what counted as dessert long before sugar was everywhere. Chapter 1. Medieval Mindset about Dessert. So, first things first, medieval people didn't think about dessert the way we do. There wasn't some neat slice of cake at the end of a meal like we're used to. Back then, sweet dishes were kind of scattered throughout the feast. You might get a bite of something honeyed or fruity right after a chunk of roast meat, or in between courses, or even before the main event. It wasn't about saving the best for last. Sweetness just played a different role in the overall meal. Also, sugar wasn't very accessible. It was rare and very expensive. Most of the sweetness came from honey, dried fruits, or wine-cooked ingredients. Basically, whatever nature offered or trade allowed. And desserts weren't always just for indulgence either. Sometimes they were used to show off wealth, celebrate a religious feast, or just balance out the heavier stuff on the table. It's a very different logic from our modern treat-yourself mindset. Chapter 2. What counted as cake? So, let's talk about cake. When medieval people said cake, they didn't always mean what we think of today. You won't find anything fluffy, layered, or topped with whipped cream. The word cake back then was more of a general term for baked goods that were round or flat and a little special compared to your everyday bread. Sometimes it was just bread, with slightly better ingredients or a fancier shape. The word itself actually comes from Old Norse, kaka, which hints at how broad the concept was. In some places, a cake could be something as simple as a hard oat disc, almost like a cracker. So, a medieval cake might feel more like a scone, a dense bread, or a spiced biscuit than anything you'd put candles on today. But even within those limits, there was quite a bit of variety. Chapter 3. Famous medieval cakes. Now that we know what cake meant back then, here are some of the most notable examples from the medieval dessert table. One of the better known examples is gingerbread. As described in some medieval cookbooks, it was made with honey, breadcrumbs, ginger, and sometimes spices like pepper or saunders. The result was dense, chewy, and deeply spiced. More candy-like than cake. Max Miller from Tasting History with Max Miller has a wonderful video in which he makes these. Go check out his channel if you'd like to learn how to make these yourself.
Let's have a go.
Honey cake was another staple. With its slightly sticky texture and rich, warm aroma, it was made with flour, honey, and sometimes oil or milk. In Eastern Europe, honey cakes like lekach were often associated with Jewish festivals and special occasions, sometimes containing warm spices like cinnamon and cloves. Sol cakes were small, round, spiced biscuits, often with currants and raisins. They were traditionally given out during All Hallowtide in exchange for prayers, a blend of tradition and dessert. The 12th night cake was more like a spiced bread, baked with a hidden bean inside. The person who found the bean would be crowned Lord of Misrule for the evening. This tradition tied the dessert to a broader seasonal celebration. Prince biscuit, a type of caraway seed cookie, was made with fine flour, sugar, lots of eggs, rose water, and caraway. The batter had to be beaten for a full hour. No easy task without a mixer. The result was a dense, bread-like biscuit glazed with sugar icing. Originally a hard ration for soldiers, the addition of sugar and spices transformed it into a treat enjoyed by the wealthy. Some were said to be the size of sugar cakes sold at Barnet Fair, suggesting they were also part of commercial culture. These recipes show just how diverse medieval cakes could be, not only in flavor, but also in shape, size, and social use. Chapter 4. Other medieval sweets. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this journey through medieval desserts, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot, and there's plenty more historical content coming your way. Cakes were just one part of the medieval sweet repertoire. Custards were common, creamy, often baked in a crust, and sometimes infused with spices. Darioles, made with milk and almond milk, eggs, and sugar were particularly popular in England. Fritters were another popular option. Apples, herbs, or nuts were battered and fried, sometimes sweetened with honey. These were found across Europe and were especially common at fairs and feast days. Bugnols, for example, were made with cheese and eggs and deep fried in pork fat before being sprinkled with sugar. Fruit was key, especially when stewed with wine, honey, and spices. Pears in syrup or cherries stewed with cloves and cinnamon could serve as standalone sweets or fillings. Preserved fruits and jams, while not exactly like modern versions, were widely enjoyed among those who could afford them. Cheese-based desserts were surprisingly common. A brie tart with ginger or honey-sweetened cheesecake wasn't unusual. Tarte de brie featured soft cheese combined with saffron and ginger in a crust, while sambucade, a type of elderflower cheesecake, was made with curds, egg whites, and rose water. In Italy, saffron cheesecakes blended sweet and savory elements in a uniquely medieval way. Marzipan, made from almonds and rose water, was a favorite among the elite. In some cases, it was molded into decorative shapes for special occasions. Massapin cuit, from Liège, is one example of marzipan tradition that developed in medieval monastic kitchens. Almonds were highly valued, and their use in sweets often marked luxury and celebration. Even without refined sugars, medieval cooks created sweet dishes with flavor, color, and aroma, relying on natural ingredients, exotic spices, and imagination. Chapter 5: Medieval Kitchens and Cooking Techniques. Most cooking happened over an open fire. For baking, a fire would be built inside a clay or stone oven. Once hot, the coals were removed, and the retained heat baked the food. If you didn't have an oven, you worked with covered pots placed in embers or pans over flames, or took your dough to a communal bakery. In wealthier homes, ovens were made of stone or brick and retained heat for extended baking sessions. The temperature was judged by experience. Some recipes advised as hot as will bear your hand. Honey cakes might be baked right in the hearth, while custards simmered gently. Fritters were fried in rendered animal fat. For those without access to an oven, dough could be shaped into flat rounds and cooked on a hot stone or griddle. Tools were simple: wooden spoons, mortars, strainers, and long-handled pans. Measuring wasn't standardized. Recipes called for as much as will serve, or the weight of 6 eggs. Spices were key. They were often combined with honey or fruit, blended in a mortar, and added toward the end of cooking for maximum aroma. Almond milk, a luxurious alternative to dairy, was especially common during fasting periods and used in cakes, custards, and even fritters. Medieval baking might not have been precise, but it was highly sensory, guided by sight, smell, and experience passed down through households and cookbooks alike. Chapter 6: Sweets and Social Class. Now here's where things get spicy. Literally. Because what you got for dessert in the Middle Ages really depended on who you were. If you were nobility, dessert wasn't just food. It was a flex. The nobility enjoyed white flour cakes, sugar, saffron, nuts, imported fruits, and elaborate decorations. Gingerbrede and soft cakes were signs of wealth, sometimes considered medicinal. Your sweet course could include spiced wine, marzipan animals, and cakes with layers of imported flavor. You might even get a whole roast bird inside a pie, served with something sweet on the side. Because why not? Middle-class folks had more modest but still tasty options. Honey was the main sweetener, and they'd splurge on spices like cinnamon and ginger if they could. Think fritters at festivals, a custard tart on Sunday, maybe a fruit pie with whatever was in season. And if you were a peasant, dessert was whatever you could forage, grow, or trade. That might mean a baked apple, some bread with a drizzle of honey, if you had any honey, maybe some stewed fruit, or a simple oat cake made from leftover dough. Not fancy, but still something to look forward to. For peasants, sweets were rare. Oat cakes, stewed fruit, and basic honey bakes were the occasional treat. Flour type itself, white versus dark, was a visible indicator of class. So yeah, Dessert in the Middle Ages wasn't just about taste, it was about status, access, and knowing someone with a spice connection. So, medieval desserts weren't modern, but they were thoughtful, resourceful, and surprisingly flavorful. Cakes, custards, fritters, and fruit dishes showed up in all kinds of forms, shaped by what people had, what they believed, and what they could celebrate. They reflected everything from geography to class to religion, and they evolved alongside the gradual introduction of sugar, new flours, and better baking tools. If you enjoyed this deep dive, leave a comment with the dessert you'd be most curious to try. Thanks for watching. If you like this, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more medieval history, and I'll see you in the next one.